Hi, I'm Claire from Care for the Family, and I'm joined here today with Patrick and Diane Regan. We're so great to have you with us, guys, and welcome. We're going to be talking about mental well-being, parenting, and bringing our children up to know and love Jesus. So, guys, why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what family life looks like for you.
You go.
You go.
Oh, dear. Okay, so we've been married, it'll be 25 years this January.
What?
Yeah, remember that. We have 4 children. We've got one in primary school, year 4, he's 8. We've got 2 in secondary school, one's 12 and one's 15. And then we've got one in college. She's about to be 18. So the whole end of the spectrum. Do you want to add to that?
No, and we run, we, as well as live together, work together. That's why I'm going a little bit grey for over the last year. And so we run a charity called Kintsugi Hope, which Kintsugi is a Japanese word which stands for golden joinery. And so I guess the whole thing is if you get a bowl and you break it, in this country we tend to mend it with super glue. And the whole idea of super glue is you hide the cracks. And but what they do in Japan is they put a gold powder in the glue, so instead of hiding the cracks, they make a feature of the cracks. Arguably the object becomes more beautiful for being broken. And so the whole charity is around beauty from brokenness, working with people to support their emotional and mental health. Started a couple of years ago. It's growing quite quickly, a little bit overwhelming. And so yes, that's what we do. We're a team working and living together and trying to do family as well. So it's an interesting mix.
Certainly is. Oh my goodness, you do an amazing job. And yes, I think the charity undoubtedly is going to be flourishing right now, because in the season that we find ourselves in, mental well-being and mental health is just something that is just so needed, and that support for people. So well done, guys. You're doing an amazing job. But why is that so important to you? Obviously, you've talked a little bit about Kintsugi Hope, but why is mental well-being so important to you? If you want to tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I think it's a combination for me. One is I worked with a lot of young people and I saw the effects of poor mental health close up. Had to deal with all sorts of traumatic situations and just the amount of young people particularly that aren't accessing mental health services. So I saw that, in my previous job I knew of 15-year-olds who completed suicides in the school toilets, and huge issues of self-harm, huge issues of anxiety, depression, which are still going on today. But it got really personal to me when I started struggling with my own emotional mental health. I went through what we describe as the Tetris moment. You're probably old enough, Claire, take that in the right way, to remember the game Tetris. You remember the game Tetris?
Just. But yeah, I do remember it. No, absolutely.
So Tetris, like all these blocks fall out of the sky, and it's a computer game. You've got to get them in a straight line, and then more come, and they get quicker and quicker and quicker. And then eventually you just can't do it anymore, and it's game over. And I think we went for a season where kids got really sick, Dad got cancer, I got really ill, I've got some big problems with my legs, degenerative problems. And I think that it was really scary, it was really lonely. I couldn't find a decent sermon on mental health at the time. It wasn't spoken about much in church culture. And as a family, it was really hard to navigate, and for both of us, wasn't it?
It was a very lonely time, actually, because I had no one to speak to, as well as Patrick having no one to speak to, but we didn't even know what to speak about or what to say or who to go to. Church was great, but limited in what they were able to do in terms of support, because we weren't able to articulate the support we even needed, because if you're not even aware there's a problem. So we'd never even really heard of the words depression or anxiety, had we? Mm. And we went through a particularly bad time where Patrick was on sabbatical. I was actually on maternity leave, and everyone thought, isn't that lovely, you've got time together as a family? But in reality, it was picking Patrick up off the floor every single day.
Yeah, and you are really passionate, therefore, about making sure that people who are caring for people who are suffering with their mental well-being, that's an important thing for you, isn't it, Diane, as well?
Yeah, I think the whole secondhand smoke thing is really important, particularly for you as a spouse, but also when your kids are going through anxiety and when your kids are going through tough stuff. Explain the secondhand smoke stuff.
So secondhand smoke, there is no risk-free level of exposure to smoking, no matter how far away you are or how well you ventilate an area. If you're in an environment there's someone smoking, it will affect you. And in the same way, when you love someone who's going through a difficult time, particularly with a mental health issue, it is virtually impossible for it not to affect you. And the statistics for people who care, in terms of how it impacts their own negative well-being, are astonishingly high. And you even can hear about and read about where the carer has had to themselves go into hospital because they're struggling while they're supporting the person that they're caring for.
Yeah, absolutely. And the knock-on effect that has for the whole family, isn't it, is really important. So I guess then, as parents yourself, how do you look after your own mental well-being, and how do you help your children to look after theirs and to talk about theirs and to be aware of this?
Yeah, I think it's about setting a culture of honesty and authenticity. You know, I always define culture as the way we do things around here. So whether that's our family or whether it's my staff team here, there's a culture, and I think that's the challenge. I think church culture hasn't always been helpful because we've kept so much of this hidden. And even in families, traditionally, you know, families don't talk about these issues, and so for me, the whole thing is, how do we have a culture of honesty and transparency? How do we have a culture where the kids, particularly, know that they can talk to us about anything, and that we are approachable? And as you will know, it's always on their timing, you know, normally late at night when you're just desperate to go to sleep, and that's the time they really want to talk or something. Or for us, particularly with our older two, you know, it's car journeys. So for us, it's less about the kitchen table and more about the car journey. But I think it's important, and I think as parents as well, something I've learned, because I'm a real activist, is I can't give out of an empty cup, and I have a responsibility to my wife and to my kids, not to burn out. And you know, I remember when I crashed, I went to see a Christian therapist, and she was like, I think you need to show yourself a bit more self-compassion. And I was like, yeah, I'm a bloke. I don't do baths and candles and stuff. You know, it don't really appeal to me. No, I don't. and she was like, you have totally misunderstood what self-compassion is, because self-compassion is talking to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend. Diane would always say to me, Patrick, your thoughts aren't always your friend. Your mind's not always your friend. And because that inner critic, isn't it? I feel like as a parent, if you're a parent, you struggle with guilt like 24/7. And you know, the shoulds, the must, I ought. So I should be doing this. I ought to be doing that. I must be better at this. And you're trying to do all things to all people. And I feel like actually, if we're going to help the kids, the best thing we can do actually is set a culture where actually nothing's off limits.
Yeah, and I think it's just being honest as well when we're struggling.
Yeah.
We you know, sometimes you think, is it the right thing to do? But actually, I think it is. So it's being aware of your own limitations and what affects you. So, for example, for me, Patrick's very much a vision person, an ideas person, and I might get the odd idea or vision once a year, if that. I'm more the putting ideas and visions into practice. And whereas Abigail, our third child, she's a bit more like Patrick. She can come up with an idea every 5 minutes. So she'll tell me an idea, and I'm just trying to work it all out, and then she'll come up with another one, and I just get overwhelmed, and then I get stressed. I mean, it took me a while when I had to step back and realise what was going on. I then had to explain to her, look, Abby, every time you give me an idea, I'm then trying to work it out, and I haven't even got to step one before you've come up with something else. Hold on, it's too much. We laugh about it now, and we're aware of it now, but it was unpacking at it, looking at it, and being honest about it, and also I think it's positive to allow them to realise that we've all got different abilities and sort of capacity levels. And it's also things like we talk about a stress bucket. If your bucket is so filled with things going on and you're not letting it out, just a simple "what's for dinner tonight, mum?" is just that little thing that can tip it over the edge, and that's it, I'm shouting at them. Where in reality it was a tiny little thing and didn't deserve that explosion, but I hadn't taken care of all the other many things that had happened, and at that point I was at tipping point. So it's letting them realise, actually, no, it's okay to ask for dinner, I'm just struggling at the moment, just give me some time, and being honest with them. I don't get it right every day.
That's really great. And that is really great to talk about self-compassion. Like, what would you do, Diane? What is your self-compassion? What's your outlook? I know, Patrick, you've talked about talking to yourself kindly, but have you got outlets that would help you to alleviate those stress and tips that you can give other people?
it's knowing that every person's different, so what helps one person might help another. So for me, as much as I love being with people, I need time by myself. And if I don't have time to myself to just sort of recharge, then it's not good news for me or anyone else around near me.
Amen.
So, I mean, lockdown in particular was very hard. Having to do homeschooling with 4 children and working was very difficult. And I'm okay-ish to a point while you're in the middle of a crisis. For me, it's afterwards when I think when the kids went back to school, I almost couldn't talk for 2 days. I didn't sort of stop crying, and it shocked me. And Patrick was very kind and arranged for me to have a few days away by myself. It was amazing. I came back a really nice person, didn't I? It lasted a little bit. So for me, it's having time by myself. It's that just coming home that 5 minutes slower, just to sit pull over and just have 5 minutes to myself before I come home, where I know everybody wants me or needs me. There's things to do.
I see her waiting in the car outside. I'm like, what is she doing?
Yeah,
and
I don't wait in the drive anymore. I wait further down. Yeah, you're telling everyone else. Or going taking the dog for a walk and listening to worship music, that helps me as well. I'm someone who loves worship music, where you just get lost in it. Rhythms of coming to God every morning, having a Bible app actually really helps me. So that's the sort of thing I do. I've also got some friends that I meet up with every 3 to 4 weeks, and we talk about things. We don't often pray. It's meant to be a prayer trip.
This is their prayer trip, but let's talk for 2 hours.
But that helps me, and then we go home and pray, and we sort of text each other regularly.
They go home and pray.
Yeah. But yeah.
I think for all of us, isn't it, like you've said, we're all different, and it's knowing what we all need, what works for each of us, but just being aware to be kind to ourselves, especially when things are particularly stressful or when things right now are uncertain. So that's really great. But as you've shared your faith journey with your children over the years, what's been useful to remember and to keep in the forefront of your mind?
I think the challenge with sharing faith with the kids is again, we've got 4 kids and they all respond really, really differently. And, how people, the thing about the Kintsugi Hope Wellbeing groups is we teach in learning styles. Because, again, I think we have this one-size-fits-all approach to education sometimes. And we realise that actually kids are incredibly different. And I think over the years we've tried to work out how the kids, respond to different things. And I think that also it's trying to ask yourself, what is God doing in them, and particularly with the teenagers, they have this this unquenchable sense for justice. And where does that come from? That sense of justice. Where why would we feel that as human beings? And so sometimes it's less sort of preaching at them and just sort of trying to fan into flame, I guess, what God's already doing. But I think one of the biggest lessons that we can share is that we have learned that we can't control them and we can't fix them. And sometimes their faith sometimes can be a bit like this, the kids. They get it, they don't get it, they've got questions. And actually you want to jump in there and go, oh, don't you understand? It's all like this. And actually it is that sense of letting them go on the journey. I often preach on the Emmaus Road. I think it's one of the most beautiful examples of how to deal with people, that the day after Jesus' resurrection, there's no big meeting, there's no feeding of the 5,000. He just walks with 2 heartbroken, disillusioned, frustrated, disappointed people, and he just lets them tell their story. And I often thought that he could have jumped in at any point and gone, guys, I'm Jesus, it's cool, we don't need to have this conversation, just do this, it'll be okay. But he just listens to them. And then, instead of jumping in again, he starts telling a bigger story. He starts telling the story of God and the prophets and how, and goes through the whole of the Old Testament almost. And then over a meal, which he wasn't going to stay for on the way, he was going to move on, and they had to persuade him to stay. Suddenly, they got who he was. And I just think that sense of, let's not be the rescuer. I know every part of us wants to rescue and wants to help, especially when it comes to kids. But when it comes to our community as well, Jesus is the rescuer, and we're the broken. I've often thought, I've been writing about this recently, the Good Samaritan. Whenever I saw that story, traditionally, I always saw myself as the Good Samaritan, the rescuer. I think now I sort of see myself more as the beggar on the road needing help. And I think we see that story through very Western eyes. And sometimes it's a bit of humility it takes to see things a little bit differently.
I'd say also, regardless of what our children have done or don't do, it's just that unconditional love and always having that, do you know, we all make mistakes, we're not expecting you to be perfect, and just always being there. And that doesn't mean just being there physically, it means being there mentally, emotionally, in all matters of how you could be present with someone. And that's really difficult because you always want to have that open communication, and as they get older it gets harder, and they don't want to let you down. And so it's always keeping that opportunity for them to be able to continually being honest with you, and so, but in the same way you have to be honest with them as well.
Yeah, and Claire, you know, I've written a book called Honesty Over Silence. So honestly, we get it wrong more than we get it right. And it is, you know, no one trains you how to do this stuff. And Diane often says, which I think is brilliant, is someone famous said it, I can't remember who said it, but it's don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And I think that is so true, that it's not perfect, but actually it can be good. We're not great role models in that way.
Yeah, and I think I'll never forget, Rob Parsons actually did the teaching that there's 3 things you need to let your children learn: disappointment with themselves, disappointment with others, and disappointment with God. And I regularly refer to that. And I say, every day I'm going to let you down. Every day you will let yourself down, but that's okay. It's not meaning you're a failure, it means you're human. So it's just being honest in those mistakes.
Definitely. And that is something we often talk about here at the Kitchen Table Project, the being real. That we're not experts, that we won't get it right all the time, that we don't have all the answers, that we're not in any way perfect, but that it's a journey together, isn't it? It's a journey as working together as a family, finding faith, exploring faith, working out each other. Yeah, definitely. We also talk about the warmth of the home as well. When there's honesty, when there's openness, and that creates a sense of security and warmth in that home that then allows your children to want to talk to you and to explore the faith that you are exploring yourself. So, yeah, that's really great. We also talk about being intentional as well, and being intentional in bringing God into family life. So what are some of the ways that you would say that you bring God into your daily, everyday family life? You've obviously shared about going out on car journeys, and that a lot of your talking will happen there. But how do you bring God into everyday family life, would you say?
I think it's different with the so we've got 2 younger ones and 2 teenagers. So the younger ones are still very happy to pray at night and, you know, talk and do that sort of stuff. The older ones not so much, if I'm honest. And so there we have to be really creative in how we have conversations, and normally it's on their agenda, not ours. And so in that sense, that's a slightly different thing. One thing I've noticed with Abigail particularly, who's 12 now, is she hears God so clearly, much more clearly than I do. So one of the things that I get her to do is pray for me, and I'm like, Abby, I'm struggling today. Could you do one of your special prayers? And she'll go away and she'll do a special prayer. But again, it makes her feel like, oh my goodness, I have something to offer to this, and I think that's really, really important. But yeah, not easy.
Yeah, and I think it's with the old ones, when they do share something with them, it's like, do you know what do you think God would say if you were in a really good place with God right now? What do you think would be something you'd say? And so getting them back to, because our old ones, will be honest, they did have a faith journey of their own, and then they, going out finding their own. They know our values, they know our vision, they know our faith. It's now they're at that point of trying to discover their own faith, their own values, their own what they want to get out of life. And we have to sort of let go of that, and we have to let God do that, because we had our plan. Well, if they go to Soul Survivor, then they meet this person, then that will happen. That's it, sorted for the rest of their life. That plan didn't happen. We tried it several times in several different ways, and it didn't happen. So it's just having to let God have control of that, and that is hard, because as a parent, you think you know the right path, you think you know the right way, and you don't. And so when you get these little moments when it's a sort of an aha moment for them, it sometimes makes it even better, because it's theirs and it's what God has done, and we've had nothing to do with it. So it's trying to capitalize on those moments that we didn't know were coming, that we weren't planning for, and that we weren't creating, rather than trying to create the moment ourselves. So it's flipping on its head, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a journey, and there are stages that we all go through in our faith, but there's that owned faith. We have to own it for ourselves. You know, Rob Parsons speaks here a lot about God doesn't have grandchildren. Each of us has to come to our own faith ourselves, and you are helping your children to do that, but they have to come to own it themselves. So what would you say then have been the main challenges for you as you've brought faith or encouraged your children to find faith, like the challenges you faced?
I think it's been what I said about having to let go and let God do it. I come from a big family, and I had, I mean, it was a great, wonderful, it wasn't perfect. My parents have an understanding of God, but it's certainly not what I would describe as, they brought God into our home in the best way that they could. So I had this vision of how it was going to be for our family. We were not going to have all the issues everyone else had. We were going to have a happy family. We were all going to get on well. The children will all love each other. It was going to be a home filled with joy and peace and just God. And the reality is so far from that in so many ways, and there's times even when we want to even escape the house just to get a bit of quiet. We have one child, or two of them with additional needs, one of them with particularly challenging, difficult needs, and it's affecting her behaviour, and both of them actually, and the behaviour affects all of us, and it's heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking. So there was a time of a period for about 2 years where we couldn't have two in the same room at the same time. And just seeing that happen, that's not meant to happen. That's not how my kids are meant to be. And you feel guilty. You feel, what have I done wrong? I'm going to get emotional now. But yeah, it is heartbreaking. It's a very heartbreaking thing. So that's been probably the biggest challenge of just, God, this was not how I thought it was going to be. How do I, and it's just that prayer of, God, what do I do with this? How do I handle this? What do I say? How can I be a good witness at this time?
I think I think one of the things that we talk a lot about is values. That values are, the way you do things, I guess. And I actually think during this season of the coronavirus and all the things that our values as a society and as a community and as a country are being challenged around what is actually really important to us. And it's the old analogy, which has been well travelled now, that if you get a jar and you get some. You could just fill it with loads and loads and loads and loads of stones, and you could put sand in it, you could put water in it, just try and fit as much as you can in it. But actually, the best thing to do if you're going to put loads of stuff in it is put the big stones in first, and build everything around that. And so I think sometimes it's like, what is the big stones? What are the most important things? And for me, it's that sense of God is love. The kids need to know that is our fundamental belief. We are very relational, relationship is absolutely key. And then we build everything else around our values rather than going, actually, the goal is more important than the journey. And I think that the journey is always more important. And like Diane's right, the journey, we don't know what the journey is going to look like. We can't control, we can't manipulate. We can't use false guilt to try and make people do what we want them to do. That wasn't Jesus' model at all, and so we're on that journey, and and we get it right and we get it wrong more often.
It's really good. Diane, just there when you obviously shared about the girls and just the challenges that has brought for you. How have you been kind to yourself in that? When things are not perfect, when they are really hard and when they are really challenging, how have you looked after yourself as an individual and then as a couple in that period of time?
Someone said to me to celebrate the marginal gains. And it's looking for them. It's always looking for the positive that has happened. And there's always good to be proud of, and there's always good to find. Sometimes you just have to look really, really hard. So it's focusing on those and recognising that a journey lasts a lifetime, doesn't it? So just although it might look like we're failing today or at that moment, 10 minutes later, and that's the amazing thing about it, 10 minutes later it could be absolutely amazing, and you'd think, well, this moment, how did that moment 10 minutes ago? Because it comes down as fast as it goes up. And it's remembering that this too will pass. This moment is not forever.
Yeah. The roller coaster of family life. Absolutely. So both of you then, I guess, if there is one thing that you could say right now to parents who are finding life challenging, finding life overwhelming right now? Is there one thing that you would say to them?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this at the moment, and I find that the government always speaks in threes, like control of our estate lives, hand, face, space, all that sort of stuff. So I think for me, I would say go gently with your emotions, go gently with yourself, go gently. There's a huge amount of pressure on parents at the moment. Even before COVID, there was a lot of pressure. Now it's incredibly intense. Go gently. Secondly, be mindful. Actually, your thoughts aren't always your friend. And I've often said, thoughts could be a bit like trains. They come into a train station, and you won't stop the trains coming into the train station, but it's about choosing whether you're going to get on that train and let that train take you into a really dark place. So a common train, I guess, if you're a parent, is I'm a complete failure. If you start believing that, you get on the train, it will take you into a dark place that isn't helpful for you or for anyone else. And so it's learning, I think taking captive every thought is actually learning not to get on the train. So be mindful, and I think thirdly is show compassion. And compassion to yourself and compassion to others. Actually, kindness is the best drug you can get. It does more for you psychologically, kindness, than any other drug. And I think God's amazing, isn't he? That he's designed something that does others good and us good in the process of doing it as well. So yeah, go gently, be mindful, show compassion.
So for me, I'd say don't compare. Don't compare your situation, your feelings, your perceived failures and your perceived wins to other people, because it's never going to compare. And I think also what's been really helpful for me is Proverbs 22 verse 6, the Message version, which is point your kids in the right direction, and then when they're old they won't fail. So although it's not happening right now, in many ways it's coming back to it with that hope, and always having that hope that in the future what we have put in them now, what we've prayed for them now, what we've shared with them and hopefully given them in terms of representing and exempling our models, will come back to them in the future.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Patrick and Diane. It's been really great talking to you, and just thank you for your honesty and your openness and your vulnerability. And if you want to find out more about the work that Patrick and Diane are doing with Kintsugi Hope, then the website is just going to come up now at the bottom of the screen. We really hope this has been helpful for you and an encouragement to you in this season.